Samuel stared out the observation window of the shuttle as the distant planet below grew larger. His fingers drummed a steady beat on the console, an unconscious habit whenever he was thinking deeply. Outside, the planet's surface shimmered under the light of its sun, a reddish hue reflecting off the barren plains and sparse mountains. "Is this it?" Samuel muttered under his breath, his voice barely audible over the hum of the ship's engines. He had been in space enough times to know that first impressions meant little. The truth was always hidden beneath the surface. The mission briefing had been simple: assist a small alien colony with stabilizing their infrastructure. They were behind on their construction projects, their technology struggling to keep up with the demands of their growing population. That's where Samuel and his team came in. With the best engineering tools and expertise humanity could offer, they were supposed to solve the problems quickly and efficiently, but nothing ever went according to plan, especially in space. "Are you all right, Samuel?" A voice broke him out of his reverie. It was Alyssa, the captain of the team and his longtime friend. Her voice had that calm tone it always did, but Samuel could sense the underlying tension. It was the same feeling he'd had when they first left Earth for this mission. "I'm fine," Samuel replied, not turning his gaze from the window. "Just thinking." Alyssa studied him for a moment before nodding, sensing his internal struggle. "I get it, it's a big deal, a new planet, new species. But we're ready for this. We've been preparing for years." Samuel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced at the crew members who were busy preparing the shuttle for landing. The team consisted of a diverse mix of humans and a few alien experts, each specializing in different fields, from environmental science to robotics. But none of that made Samuel feel less uneasy. There was something about this mission that didn't sit right with him. It wasn't the planet itself or the mission parameters, or even the alien species they were meant to help. It was the unknown. It always was. The shuttle's engines shifted, signaling their descent. The moment had arrived. Samuel took a deep breath and pushed the unease to the back of his mind. He had a job to do. As the shuttle broke through the clouds, the terrain below came into focus, rocky, vast, and mostly lifeless. There were signs of habitation, though, small clusters of domes and alien structures that appeared to be made from a mixture of metal and a crystalline substance that shimmered even from this distance. Alyssa leaned forward. "Looks like they've been trying to build more, but it's not going well. Those structures are unstable." "I see," Samuel murmured, noting the fragility of the buildings. "That's where we come in, I suppose." The shuttle landed with a soft thud, the gears grinding as it settled into place. The hatch opened, and the air was thick with the scent of alien flora, a sharp, earthy smell that reminded Samuel of wet soil after a heavy rain. The ground was uneven beneath his boots as he stepped out, taking in the barren yet strangely beautiful landscape. But his attention was drawn to the figures waiting for them. Two aliens, tall and slender, with pale blue skin and elongated limbs, approached. Their eyes were large, a deep black void, and they held themselves with an air of quiet intelligence. Behind them, a group of smaller figures stood, more of the same species, their faces cautious and curious. "Welcome to Uthora." One of the aliens spoke in a clear but accented voice. "We appreciate your assistance. Our colony is in need of your expertise." Samuel nodded, adjusting the tools at his waist. "We're here to help," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Let's start by seeing what we're working with." The alien nodded again, his black eyes flicking to the crew behind Samuel. "We can show you our needs. But first we must attend to something unexpected." Samuel raised an eyebrow. "Unexpected." The alien's gaze lingered for a moment longer than necessary before he gestured for them to follow. "You will see." As they walked toward the alien structures, Samuel couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, something deeper than just the unstable buildings. But it wasn't until they arrived at a small, dimly lit workshop that his unease truly began to grow. There, sitting in the corner of the room, was a small alien child, no older than 10 Earth years, with dark purple skin and wide, observant eyes. She was working feverishly on a strange device, a combination of metal and crystal, hammering away at the pieces with what appeared to be crude tools. But what caught Samuel's attention wasn't the device, it was the child's determination, and the fact that all the tools he'd brought for the mission were missing. "Where are my tools?" Samuel asked, his voice sharp with sudden realization. The alien who had led them into the room paused. His expression remained unreadable, but Samuel could feel the tension in the air. He turned to the child, noticing her steady hands, even at such a young age. She was building something, but it wasn't the task he had come here to complete. Something was off, and Samuel needed answers. But the child's work seemed important, no, essential, and her eyes met his with a quiet intensity. For a moment, the weight of the silence was unbearable. "I'm building a crutch for my father," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper, but filled with a strange power. And in that moment, Samuel realized that this mission was no longer about the tools or the buildings. It was about something far more complex, something that would challenge everything he thought he knew about this galaxy. Samuel's gaze shifted from the child Zara to the empty space around her. His tools, his lifeline on this mission, were nowhere to be seen. He had meticulously packed everything he needed: diagnostic devices, repair kits, specialized tools for alien technology. Everything was calibrated to perfection, but now the absence of his equipment felt like a void in his chest. The child's fingers paused on the device she was building, noticing Samuel's intense stare. Her large, dark eyes met his, unblinking. "You're looking for something," she said softly, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Where are my tools?" Samuel's voice cracked with frustration, though he tried to keep it steady. He couldn't afford to show weakness. Not in front of these people, not in front of this child. Zara blinked, her gaze lingering on the scattered pieces she was working with. "I didn't take them." Her voice held no malice, no sign of guilt. Instead, she seemed genuinely confused, almost innocent. Samuel's jaw clenched. "I didn't say you did," he replied, though the accusation hung in the air like a silent echo. He turned to the alien guide who had led them into the room. The tall alien, whose blue skin almost seemed to glow under the dim lights, maintained his stoic expression. "We have not touched your tools," he said in his slow, deliberate tone. "Perhaps you misremembered their location." Samuel shook his head. He had double-checked everything before landing. The tools were gone. Someone had taken them, and he wasn't about to let this slide. Not now. Not when they were so close to helping. His mind raced through possibilities. Had they been misplaced? No, they were valuable, too valuable to be forgotten. Had the aliens taken them as a precaution? But why? Why not just ask? If they needed something, they could have simply requested it. Zara stood up, the small device she was working on still unfinished. "I'll help you find them," she said, her voice unwavering, though there was a hint of unease behind her words. "I don't know where they went, but I can find them." The alien guide hesitated before responding. "Zara," he said firmly, "do not involve yourself in these matters. The humans will figure it out on their own." But Zara ignored him, her eyes locking onto Samuel's. "I know how to look," she said quietly. "I know where things go. I can find them. I promise." Samuel studied her for a moment. There was something about the girl, something in the way she spoke, the way her gaze was filled with determination. He didn't know if he trusted her completely, but he knew he needed help. The frustration gnawing at him was only growing, and he couldn't afford to waste time. "I'm not asking for promises," Samuel said, his voice quieter now, "but if you can help, I'll take it." He exhaled sharply, the weight of the situation finally hitting him. "You don't understand. Without those tools, I can't fix anything. We're stuck here." Zara's face softened for a moment, her youthful features showing a rare vulnerability. "I understand," she said. "But I think maybe you don't need them." She glanced at the device she had been working on, her fingers absent-mindedly running over the edges of its metal surface. "Sometimes, things can be fixed with what you already have." Samuel stared at her for a long moment. The idea was almost absurd. How could something be repaired without the right tools? But there was something in Zara's eyes, a quiet confidence he couldn't ignore. "You're serious?" he asked, disbelief coloring his voice. Zara nodded. Yes, my father taught me that. We don't always have the things we need, but we always have something. Samuel didn't know what to say to that. He had always relied on the precision of his tools, the technology at his fingertips. He hadn't learned how to think without them. Zara, though, she had learned to make do with whatever she had. For a brief moment, Samuel considered the possibility that maybe, just maybe, there was something to what she said. But before he could respond, the alien guide interrupted them again. "You are wasting time," the alien said, his tone now slightly sharp. "You should focus on your mission, not these distractions." Samuel bristled, a flash of irritation rising in his chest. "I am focused on the mission," he snapped. "And part of that mission is ensuring that I have what I need to complete it." The guide's expression hardened, but he said nothing more. Samuel knew there was more going on here than anyone was letting on. The tools didn't just vanish. Someone took them and someone needed to answer for it. Zara's small hand reached for Samuel's arm, her touch light but firm. "I'll help you," she said again, her voice calm. "Just trust me. I'll find them." Samuel sighed, his frustration still simmering beneath the surface, but he nodded. "All right, show me what you've got." "Let's see if you can help me fix this." Zara smiled, a small but genuine expression of determination, and for the first time since landing, Samuel felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this mission wasn't as hopeless as he thought, but he knew deep down something was terribly wrong, and the disappearance of his tools was only the beginning. The dimly lit room was quiet, except for the soft hum of the equipment and the occasional scrape of metal on metal. Zara had returned to her workbench, her delicate fingers moving with surprising precision, assembling parts of a crude device. Samuel watched her for a moment, still processing the fact that the tools he relied on had vanished. But his attention was drawn away from his frustration when Zara stood up, wiping her hands on her clothes. "I have to show you something," Zara said, her voice steady, though there was an underlying urgency to it. She motioned for Samuel to follow her as she moved toward the far corner of the room, where a small bed-like structure sat. At first, Samuel thought it was just another piece of furniture, but as he approached, his eyes locked onto the figure lying there, a man, though not like any human he had ever seen. He was large, with thick, muscular limbs and a dark green hue to his skin. His face was partially obscured by a makeshift bandage wrapped around his head, but even from a distance, it was clear that he was in pain. His eyes flickered open as Zara stepped closer, and he gave her a weak smile. "Father," Zara said softly, her voice full of tenderness. "I've been working on it." The man's eyes shifted toward Samuel. Despite the clear discomfort he was in, there was a flicker of recognition in his gaze. "A human," he rasped, his voice hoarse. "I've heard of your kind." Samuel nodded, though his mind was racing. The man's presence, the way he was looking at him, it felt like there was something more to this. Zara had mentioned earlier that her father had been injured, but seeing him now, it was clear the injury was more severe than he had let on. Zara sat down beside him, her small form somehow appearing even smaller next to the imposing figure of her father. She gently adjusted the bandages around his head, her hands moving with the careful precision of someone who had done this before. "He was hurt during a collapse," she explained, her voice low but steady. "The structures we built, they weren't stable. And then when the quake started, the quake did more than just shake the ground." The man interrupted, his voice faint but filled with a quiet strength. "It destroyed more than just buildings, it broke our spirits too." Samuel didn't know what to say. The pain in the room was palpable, and it wasn't just the physical kind. There was a deep sadness here, a weight that hung over them all. Zara was clearly doing her best to hold things together, but it was clear that the situation was dire. The man's eyes shifted to the device that Zara had been working on, and he sighed softly. "She has been trying to fix it for days," he muttered. "But it's beyond her. She needs the right tools." Samuel's chest tightened. The father was right. Zara's ingenuity was remarkable, but it wasn't enough. The device she was attempting to build was crude, and it was evident that without proper tools she was working blind. But she had managed to make progress, which was something. "I can help," Samuel said, his voice carrying a weight of sincerity he didn't expect. "I can fix it, if you trust me." Zara looked up at him, her eyes meeting his with a mix of hope and uncertainty. "Do you think you can?" "I know I can," he said, the certainty in his tone surprising even himself. He glanced down at the device. "But we'll need to find my tools first." The room fell silent for a moment, the weight of the situation settling in. Zara's father closed his eyes, a deep, pained sigh escaping his lips. "Zara," he whispered, "you've always had more faith in others than I have. But be careful. Trusting humans, it's not easy." Zara turned to her father, her expression softening. "I know, but I trust him. He wants to help." Samuel felt a strange weight on his shoulders as Zara's words echoed in his mind. "I'll find a way," he muttered under his breath. But even as he said it, doubts crept into his mind. He had never been one to fail in his work, but this was different. He had no tools, no resources, and the situation was more complicated than it seemed. Zara's father gave him a look, one that Samuel couldn't quite place, something like a silent challenge, or perhaps a test. But before he could dwell on it, the man spoke again. "You're a human," the father said, his tone stronger now, "and you might be our last hope. But you should know this. We've learned the hard way not to place too much faith in things that seem simple. Be prepared for things to get more complicated than you think." Samuel nodded slowly, the gravity of the father's words settling into his chest. He had heard similar warnings before, but something about this place, this mission, felt different. The quiet strength of the father, the trust in Zara's eyes, it was all leading him down a path he wasn't sure he was ready for. "Let's get to work," he said finally, forcing the unease aside. "We have a lot to do." And with that, the weight of their mission and their shared struggle was made clear. There was no turning back now. Samuel didn't know what to expect as he followed Zara out of the room, his mind racing. His hands still ached from the hours spent searching for the missing tools, each moment bringing him no closer to understanding what had happened. The task at hand was slipping further out of his reach, and yet, as he glanced over at Zara, he couldn't help but wonder if this was more than just a missing toolkit. Zara walked briskly ahead, her steps purposeful, though her face was a mix of determination and weariness. Her brow was furrowed, but her eyes, those dark, intelligent eyes, held a quiet fire. It was the fire that caught Samuel's attention most. There was something about her, something about the way she viewed the world that made her stand apart from the others. "How old are you, Zara?" Samuel asked, his voice soft, trying to strike up a conversation. The silence between them had begun to feel too heavy. She glanced over at him, her expression unreadable for a moment before she answered. "I'm 14, she said simply, her voice steady, almost older than her years. "But age doesn't mean much here." Samuel raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What do you mean by that?" She shrugged, not breaking her stride. "When you live in a place like this, you learn to grow up fast. We don't have the luxury of time." Her voice wavered only slightly, a hint of something deeper beneath her words, something Samuel couldn't quite place. "I've had to learn how to fix things on my own since I was little." There was a pause as they walked side by side, the cool alien air brushing past them. Samuel felt an odd sense of kinship with Zara. She reminded him of the people back home, of the resilience he'd seen in his own community, in the faces of people who were always overlooked, always underfunded, but who somehow made things work against all odds. It was a characteristic he recognized. "You seem like you've done more than just fix things," Samuel said thoughtfully, keeping his voice neutral. "You're pretty good at building things too." Zara smiled faintly, but didn't respond immediately. Her eyes were fixed ahead, but there was a subtle change in her posture, as though she had heard the compliment but wasn't sure how to take it. "I try," she said finally. "It's what we do. When you're expected to live with what you have, you find ways to make it work." Samuel nodded, the words hitting close to home. "It's the same where I come from. We had to learn to make do with what we had. Sometimes we didn't have much of anything, but that didn't stop us from trying. Zara glanced at him then, studying his face with a curiosity he hadn't expected. "Where are you from?" she asked, her tone different now, more curious than before. "I'm from Earth," he answered, almost instinctively. "A city called New Orleans. It's not a place that gets much attention, but it's home." "New Orleans," Zara repeated, sounding it out as though she was learning the word. "What's it like?" Samuel thought for a moment. He hadn't really talked about Earth in a long time, especially not to someone who had never even heard of it. "It's a mix of old and new," he said finally. "The buildings are beautiful, but there's a lot of decay. We've got a history, a lot of culture, music, food, festivals. People get by even when things are tough." Zara nodded, her gaze softening, though there was something in her expression that suggested she didn't fully understand. "Sounds like here," she said. "We have a history too, and we survive, even when it feels like we won't." The words hung in the air between them, unspoken feelings pooling at their feet. For a moment, Samuel didn't know what to say. There was something about Zara's resilience that stirred something deep inside him. She was like so many people he'd known, people who had to fight for every inch of progress, yet never gave up. "You ever wish you could just leave?" Samuel asked, his voice quiet, almost a whisper. Zara didn't answer right away. Instead, she stopped walking and turned to face him. Her gaze was intense, almost searching. "I've thought about it," she said slowly. "But it's not that simple. This place, this planet. It's all I've ever known. It's where my family is. Even if I wanted to leave, I wouldn't know where to go." There was a trace of sorrow in her voice now, a hidden longing for something more than what she had. Samuel could feel the weight of her words, and for a brief moment he imagined what it must be like for her, stuck on a planet that was slowly crumbling around her, forced to make do with the scraps left behind. "I get it," Samuel said quietly. "I really do. I guess that's why I'm here, to help you fix things, to fix this place." Zara's expression softened, the edge in her voice fading. She didn't say anything for a long while, and Samuel wasn't sure if she even agreed with him, but when she finally spoke, there was a flicker of something like hope. "Maybe we can fix it together," she said. Samuel felt a weight lift from his shoulders just a little. There was something about her, something that made him believe this mission wasn't hopeless. She wasn't giving up, not even when it seemed like the world was falling apart. He could respect that. Samuel's frustration simmered just below the surface as he walked alongside Zara, his eyes scanning every corner of the complex. The alien structures, designed in a minimalist style with sharp angular lines, seemed almost alien in their simplicity. Yet despite their advanced technology, everything appeared fragile, teetering on the brink of collapse. The air, tinged with the scent of metal and dust, made Samuel's throat dry. Every step he took felt heavier, as though the missing tools were an anchor he couldn't shake off. Without them, he was powerless. The systems they had come to repair would remain broken, and Zara's father would continue to suffer. "I don't know why they'd take the tools," Samuel muttered, almost to himself. "They're not dangerous. They're not weapons. I need them to fix everything." Zara, walking beside him, glanced up at him, her expression unreadable. "Not everyone understands what you can do with tools," she said quietly. "Not everyone sees them as something that can help. Some people only see what they're afraid of." Samuel nodded, but her words didn't ease the weight in his chest. He had worked with tools his entire life, and never once had he thought of them as dangerous. They were his connection to the world around him, his way of building, of fixing, of making things whole again. They approached a large, imposing building at the edge of the complex. The walls were made of the same crystalline material Samuel had seen earlier, shimmering faintly in the soft light of the setting sun. The air was cooler here, and the structure seemed more solid than the others. Yet even from a distance, Samuel could see the cracks running through the walls, the signs of instability. "This is where I think they're keeping the tools," Zara said, her voice low. "I don't know how, but I feel like something is wrong here. It's like they're hiding something." Samuel felt a prickling sensation along the back of his neck. The atmosphere in the building was different from the rest of the colony. There was a heaviness to it, a sense that something had shifted in the air. He followed Zara inside, his eyes scanning the space around them. The inside was dimly lit with flickering lights hanging overhead. The walls were lined with shelves, some stacked with alien materials, others with what appeared to be pieces of advanced technology. Yet his tools were nowhere to be found at HFY. "We're going to have to search every inch of this place," Samuel said, his voice tight with urgency. "I'm not leaving without them." Zara nodded, her face set with determination. She moved to the nearest shelf, her fingers grazing over the alien devices. Samuel watched her for a moment, impressed by how easily she moved through the complex. It was clear that this was her element, a place where she had some measure of control. Suddenly the sound of footsteps echoed through the building, growing louder with each passing second. Zara froze, her eyes widening in alarm. Samuel's heart skipped a beat as he turned toward the entrance. A group of tall, angular figures entered the room, their movements smooth and deliberate. The alien guide, the one who had led them to the colony, was at the forefront, flanked by two others. Their expressions were unreadable, but the tension in the air was palpable. "I knew you'd come here," the guide said, his voice steady but filled with a subtle threat. "I warned you to focus on your mission. This is not your concern." Samuel stepped forward, his fists clenched. "My tools were taken. You have no right to keep them from me. If you want this mission to succeed, I need them. If you want to help your people, you'll give them back." The guide's eyes narrowed, his posture rigid. "You don't understand," he said, his voice cold. "We've been watching you, observing. Your tools, your technology, it's too advanced for us. We cannot allow you to continue." "Not like this." "What do you mean, too advanced?" Samuel demanded, his voice rising. "These tools are for repairs, nothing more. We're not here to conquer you. We're here to help." The alien's expression hardened. "That's what you think. But your technology represents a threat to us. You've been a part of the very thing that's destabilized this planet. You humans are not as harmless as you believe." Zara's hand clenched at her side, her eyes flashing with a mix of anger and confusion. "That's not true," she said, stepping forward. "You don't understand what they're doing here. Samuel is trying to help us. He's not the enemy." The guide's gaze flicked briefly to Zara, his expression faltering just for a second. But then it hardened again, a faint flicker of disdain in his eyes. "You have no idea what you're asking for, child. Your kind has already caused enough damage. You will not be allowed to continue." Samuel's frustration boiled over. "I'm done with this," he snapped. "We're leaving with those tools, whether you like it or not." Without another word, he turned toward the shelves, his eyes scanning the room for any sign of the missing tools. He couldn't afford to waste any more time. But before he could move further, the guide raised his hand, stopping him in his tracks. "You won't find them," he said, his voice laced with warning. "You're not welcome here anymore. Leave now or face the consequences." The tension in the room reached a boiling point. Samuel's pulse quickened, but as he looked over at Zara, he saw something in her eyes, something that told him this wasn't just about the tools anymore. It was bigger than that. And they weren't going to back down, not now. Zara's hands trembled slightly as she picked up the half-assembled crutch. Samuel could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the way her shoulders sagged with the weight of her task. Yet she still didn't stop. Her focus was razor-sharp, and her determination burned brighter than the dim lights overhead. "You're really not giving up, are you?" Samuel asked, his voice soft but filled with genuine respect. Zara paused for a moment, glancing up at him. "I can't. My father needs this, and I'm all he has." Her gaze flicked to the crutch in her hands, then to the unfinished pieces scattered across the workbench. "I'm not like you. I don't have all the tools, but I know how to make things work. I have to." Samuel's heart tightened. He understood the weight of responsibility, the feeling of not being able to rest until something was done. But there was something about Zara's persistence, something beyond the typical drive. She wasn't just trying to fix something, she was trying to restore her world, her family. It was a level of dedication he hadn't expected from someone so young. "This won't hold up, you know," Samuel said gently, looking at the crutch. Not with what you've got here. Zara didn't look at him. She just kept working, adjusting the pieces, her hands moving quickly despite the clear signs of wear. I know, but I'll try anyway, I have to. Samuel stepped closer, examining the crutch. It was clumsy, made of alien materials, and there were visible weaknesses in the structure. Even with his best tools, it would take a lot of work to make it functional. You know, this could be stronger if we had the right materials, Samuel said, his mind already running through possibilities. And if we could— No, Zara interrupted, her voice firm. She finally stopped what she was doing and turned to face him, her eyes flashing with frustration. No more ifs, Samuel. If we had the tools, maybe. But we don't. And this is all I have. This is all I can do. Samuel felt a pang of guilt. It was clear now that Zara had no choice but to make do. She wasn't asking for help. She was doing everything she could with the little she had. For a long moment he didn't speak. The weight of the silence between them seemed to stretch on, thick with unspoken understanding. Finally, he sighed. You're right. We don't have the luxury of ifs. Without thinking, Samuel moved over to one of the nearby shelves, his fingers brushing over the alien materials. He had to admit, there was something fascinating about the technology here, even if it was crude and not fully understood. Maybe he couldn't make this crutch perfect, but he could make it better. I can help, he said, turning back to Zara. We don't need the tools I had back in the ship. But I can still make this work, at least enough to help your father. Zara's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't respond immediately. She looked at him for a moment, considering his words. How? First, Samuel said, moving to one side, let's figure out what materials we can use. The shape needs to be stronger, more stable. We'll reinforce it with something from this shelf, something that's sturdy enough to withstand the weight. Zara watched him, skepticism still etched across her face, but she didn't stop him. Samuel worked quickly, pulling together pieces from different parts of the workshop. He mixed and matched, adjusting and realigning components, a new plan taking shape in his mind. Okay, Samuel said after a while, stepping back and gesturing for Zara to examine the adjusted crutch. What do you think? Zara stepped forward, her brow furrowed. She ran her fingers along the crutch, testing its weight, its balance. For a long moment, there was no word, no comment, but then she finally nodded. It's stronger, she admitted, though her voice still held a hint of doubt. But it's not perfect. My father, he'll need more than just a crutch. This is only part of it. Samuel nodded slowly, understanding the weight of her words. I know, but it's a start. We're not done yet. I can work on it more, refine it as we go. Zara glanced at him, then back at the crutch. There was a flicker of something in her eyes, maybe hope, maybe disbelief that he couldn't quite read. I never thought it would be like this, she said, almost to herself. I thought I had to do it alone, but maybe you're right. Samuel smiled faintly. You don't have to do it alone, Zara, not anymore. Zara gave him a small, uncertain smile in return, her eyes softening. I guess not. The moment stretched between them, and for the first time since Samuel had arrived on the planet, he felt the weight of their shared purpose. They were partners in this, whether the aliens approved of it or not. They were working towards something bigger than just repairing a crutch or a broken building. They were rebuilding trust, rebuilding hope. And with that thought, Samuel felt a renewed sense of purpose. The tools, the technology, even the aliens, they could wait. For now, it was just him and Zara, and that was enough. The workshop was quiet now, save for the soft sounds of tools scraping against metal and the distant hum of the colony's failing infrastructure. Samuel's eyes lingered on the crutch he and Zara had worked on. It wasn't much, but it was something. Something to hold on to, something to offer. But as he looked at the crude contraption, his mind kept returning to the same problem, the tools, his tools, the ones that had vanished without explanation. He knew the aliens were hiding something, but they had made it clear that they weren't going to give up their hold on the colony's resources. The longer they stayed, the more uncertain things became. Zara, sitting cross-legged nearby, was deep in thought. her fingers still occasionally adjusting the crutch. Samuel's gaze moved to her, noting the furrow in her brow, the quiet determination she exuded, even when she didn't speak. "I've been thinking about what you said earlier," Samuel began, breaking the silence. "About doing things on our own without the tools, without the resources we're used to." Zara looked up, her expression unreadable, though there was a trace of curiosity in her eyes. "Yeah? And what do you think?" Samuel hesitated. The words he needed to say were difficult to form, but he pushed through. "It's not easy, is it? Accepting that we don't always have what we need. I've spent my whole career relying on technology, on tools, and now I feel lost. Without them, I'm just a guy with a bunch of broken parts and no way to fix them." Zara didn't respond right away. Instead, she stood up and walked over to the workbench, running her fingers over the crutch. She paused, then turned to face Samuel. "I get it," she said quietly. "I know what it feels like to not have enough, but sometimes we make do with what we've got. We don't have a choice." Samuel nodded, but his mind was elsewhere, caught in a storm of doubts. He had always been someone others could depend on, someone who could always fix things, who could always come up with a solution. But without his tools, the weight of his failure began to press against him. He was supposed to be the one with the answers, but all he could offer now were half-baked solutions and empty promises. "I don't know if I can fix everything, Zara," Samuel admitted, his voice heavier than he intended. "There's so much that needs to be done, and it feels like we're running out of time." Zara's eyes softened, and she took a step closer to him. "You're trying," she said simply. "That's all anyone can do. You don't have to fix everything right away. But it's not enough." Samuel's frustration burst out, his hands clenching at his sides. "I can't just sit here and wait while things fall apart. People are depending on me." Zara's face was calm, steady. "And what if you're not the only one who can fix it? What if it's not just you?" "You're not alone in this, Samuel." Her words hit him like a wave. For a moment he stood frozen, trying to make sense of what she was saying. Zara wasn't asking him to do it all. She wasn't looking for him to save the day. She was telling him that they were in this together, that they had to rely on each other, not just on his skills or his tools. "I know you want to help," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "But you're carrying a lot on your shoulders. It's okay to ask for help, to lean on others when you need to." Samuel's shoulders sagged, the weight of his own expectations lifting just a little. It was true. He had been trying to do it all on his own, carrying the burden of the mission, of fixing everything, when in reality he wasn't alone. He had Zara, the aliens, even the colony itself. It wasn't just his responsibility, and yet the nagging voice in his head still told him that it had to be him, that if he didn't succeed, everything would fall apart. "I just want to fix this," Samuel muttered, his voice quieter now. "For your father, for all of you." Zara nodded, her eyes soft with understanding. "You will," she said simply, "but not all at once. One step at a time, and you don't have to do it alone." There was a long silence between them, the hum of the equipment and the distant rumble of the planet's unstable core, the only sounds in the room. For the first time since arriving, Samuel felt the pressure on his chest ease just a little. "I'll try," he said finally, his voice steady. "I'll do what I can." Zara smiled, though it was a small smile, one of quiet acceptance. "That's all we can do." Samuel nodded, feeling a quiet sense of resolve building inside him. It wasn't going to be easy, and there would be more challenges ahead. But for the first time since landing on this alien world, he didn't feel quite so alone. As he turned back to the workbench, his hands felt a little steadier, his thoughts a little clearer. The road ahead was uncertain, but at least he wasn't walking it alone. The dim lights flickered again as Samuel adjusted the makeshift crutch, tightening the grip on the structure they'd fashioned together. The weight of their work was heavy, but a sense of accomplishment lingered in the air. However, there was something unspoken, something gnawing at the edges of his mind. Every day brought them closer to a solution, but it also brought them closer to a confrontation they couldn't avoid. Zara, who had been staring at the crutch with a mixture of doubt and hope, suddenly looked up. "We should go." I've got a feeling something's going to happen soon. Samuel raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Zara shifted on her feet, her gaze distant. The people who've been watching us. I don't trust them. The ones who took your tools. I think they've been waiting for us to make a mistake, and now that we're getting close, they're going to try something. A chill ran down Samuel's spine. He hadn't wanted to acknowledge it, but Zara was right. The tension had been building like the stillness before a storm. They weren't just dealing with broken systems, they were dealing with a hidden conflict, one that was slowly escalating. Then we need to act fast, Samuel said, his voice tense. Before they make their move. The two of them set out toward the colony's outer perimeter, the faint hum of malfunctioning machinery in the background. The sun was setting, casting an orange hue across the rugged landscape. The air was thin, but it carried a weight that made Samuel's chest feel tight. As they approached the far side of the colony, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking just out of sight. Zara's eyes darted around them, her senses heightened. I don't know exactly where they are, but they're close. We need to find a way to get in and get out without being seen. Samuel nodded. The plan was simple. Find the tools, get out. But the more he thought about it, the more complicated it seemed. They were on a hostile world in a colony teetering on the brink of collapse, and they were being watched by people who saw them as a threat. It felt like a trap, and every step closer to their goal felt like they were walking into it. As they rounded a corner, a sound suddenly pierced the air, a loud mechanical screech followed by the sound of heavy footsteps. Samuel's heart raced. What was that? Zara's face went pale. Ambush! Before Samuel could react, two figures emerged from the shadows, armed with makeshift weapons. The aliens were tall, their bodies angular, with features that looked like they belonged to another world entirely. Their eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, and their movements were swift and precise. Zara's hand instinctively went to the crutch she had built, but Samuel held her back. Wait, he whispered, pulling her closer into the shadows. Don't fight them yet. We need to think this through. But as the aliens drew nearer, it was clear they weren't just guarding something, they were hunting for something. The tension in the air thickened, and Samuel realized the situation was more dire than he had first imagined. He wasn't just trying to fix broken systems or retrieve lost tools. He was now fighting for survival. One of the aliens, with a long serpentine body, stopped just a few feet away from their hiding place. Its eyes scanned the area, sharp and calculating. Samuel held his breath, the sound of his own heartbeat deafening in his ears. The alien sniffed the air, its gaze lingering just inches from where they crouched. Samuel's mind raced, calculating their options. His training kicked in, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they were outmatched. Zara's eyes were wide, her fingers gripping the crutch tightly, ready to strike at any moment. Just wait, Samuel murmured. We need to find an opening. For what felt like an eternity, they stayed perfectly still, every muscle in Samuel's body tensed, every sense alert. The alien didn't move, its glowing eyes still scanning the shadows. But then, unexpectedly, a sound came from behind them, a low, rumbling growl. The alien's head snapped in the direction of the noise, giving them the precious moment they needed to slip away. Now, Samuel whispered. They sprinted in the opposite direction, adrenaline coursing through their veins. The air felt heavier, the ground uneven beneath their feet. But Samuel's focus was unwavering. They had to get to the tools. They had to get out before the situation escalated any further. But just as they neared the next building, the sound of more footsteps, louder this time, echoed through the alleyway. They weren't going to make it. The ambush had begun, and now they had no choice but to face it head-on. The sound of footsteps was relentless, growing louder with each passing second. Samuel's mind raced, and his body reacted instinctively. Zara was beside him, her breath shallow but steady as they continued their sprint. The shadows of the alien structures seemed to close in around them, pressing them further into the narrow alleyways between buildings. There was nowhere to hide now, just a straight path ahead, the only option left. Samuel glanced over at Zara, her face set in determination. We need to keep moving. If we stop now, we're done for. Zara nodded without a word. She wasn't the type to waste time with words when action was needed. Her focus was absolute, her eyes scanning their surroundings for any possible escape route. But the alien forces were closing in, their dark figures silhouetted against the faint orange light of the setting sun. The hunt had begun. They pushed forward, zigzagging through the alleyways, trying to throw off their pursuers. Samuel's mind kept replaying their earlier encounter, those alien eyes glowing and calculating. Every moment felt like a step closer to disaster. He had always been good at working under pressure, but this wasn't just about technology or tools anymore. This was about survival. "Where are they taking us?" Zara's voice broke into his thoughts, her words sharp with fear, but tinged with urgency. "I don't know," Samuel said, his voice low and strained, "but we can't let them catch us. They know we're onto something and they won't stop until we're out of the picture." Ahead, the alleyway opened into a larger courtyard, the shadows stretching long across the cracked ground. Samuel hesitated for a split second, his mind racing to calculate their options. There was no way to outrun them, not without more cover, not without those tools. And if they didn't find them soon, all this would have been for nothing. "We need to split up," Samuel said, his voice firm. "I'll go left. You go right." Zara looked at him, confusion flashing in her eyes. "What?" "They'll follow one of us," Samuel explained quickly. "It's the only chance we've got to break the line." Without waiting for another word, Samuel darted left, cutting through the shadows. Zara hesitated for only a second, then turned, disappearing into the opposite side of the courtyard. Samuel's heart pounded in his chest as he ran. Every step felt like it was measured against a ticking clock. Behind him, the alien soldiers were gaining ground, but his split-second decision had worked. They were focused on Zara's path now. He just needed to get to the tools before they realized he'd tricked them. The courtyard seemed endless, the tall alien structures looming overhead casting long shadows. Samuel ducked into a narrow gap between two buildings, praying it would lead him to something, anything useful. The sound of pursuit was a constant hum in his ears, but he couldn't afford to stop. He had no idea where Zara was, but she was a step ahead, and he couldn't let that advantage go to waste. As Samuel moved deeper into the maze of corridors, a low hum filled the air. His heart skipped. It was the sound of energy, power surging through the walls. His tools had to be nearby. The noise was unmistakable, and if he followed it, he might find what he was looking for. The walls here were lined with intricate alien technology, something he couldn't yet understand. But the hum was familiar. It was the pulse of a generator, one powerful enough to power the entire colony. His tools had to be near a power source. The hum grew louder as Samuel neared a large, closed-off room at the end of the corridor. It was sealed tight, but Samuel could feel the air around him vibrating. He reached out, his hand trembling slightly, and pushed against the wall. To his surprise, the door creaked open, revealing a hidden chamber inside. There in the center of the room were his tools, exactly where he knew they would be. They were surrounded by alien equipment, a mix of strange, crystalline technology and advanced machinery that seemed to pulse with a faint blue glow. But before he could step forward, the sound of footsteps reached his ears once again. This time the noise wasn't from one direction, it was from all sides. The ambush wasn't over. They had figured out his ruse, and now they were closing in. Samuel's heart pounded as he stood in the doorway, unsure of his next move. The tools were right in front of him, but the risk of being caught was too high. He could take them, but would he make it out alive? From the corner of his eye he saw movement. Zara, her form barely visible, weaving between the shadows. She had made it. She was here, and they still had a chance to escape. Samuel reached for the tools, his fingers brushing the familiar metal. He was so close to fixing everything. But as the footsteps grew louder, he realized that no matter what, the escape wouldn't be easy. The real battle was just beginning. Samuel stood frozen in the doorway, his fingers grazing the cold metal of his tools. The air in the hidden room pulsed with a faint electric hum, but the weight of the situation pressed on him harder than any machine ever could. He had the tools in front of him, the very tools he needed to fix the broken colony and help Zara's father. but the price for taking them now felt higher than ever. The footsteps were getting louder. The alien soldiers were closing in from every direction. They knew he was here, and they would stop at nothing to prevent him from leaving with the tools. He turned back to the chamber, glancing over at the advanced machinery scattered around the room. There was nothing else to do. He had come this far, and the only way out was with the tools in hand. But just as he stepped forward, a voice rang out from behind him. "You really think you can just take those?" Samuel froze. His heart skipped a beat as he turned slowly to face the figure that had emerged from the shadows. It was the alien guide, the one who had led them to this colony in the first place. His eyes were narrowed, his face hard as stone, and the air between them crackled with tension. "You don't understand," the guide said, his voice calm but dripping with a quiet menace. "These tools are not just tools. They are a part of something much larger, something you're not meant to understand." Samuel's pulse quickened. "I don't care what they are. I need them to fix the systems to help you. Your people are suffering because of this." "You don't have to stop me." The guide shook his head slowly, his lips curling into a faint smile. "You think I'm stopping you because I want to control the technology. No, this isn't about control. This is about survival." Samuel's brows furrowed. "Survival? What are you talking about?" The guide's expression darkened, the smile fading. "You think this colony's problems are all because of malfunctioning equipment? You think the reason we've been in decline is because of your tools?" "I don't understand," Samuel said, taking a step forward, his voice rising. "You've been hiding the tools, sabotaging our efforts. Your people are dying and all you're doing is making it worse." The alien took a deep breath and stepped closer, his voice lowering to a near whisper. "The true reason this colony is failing has nothing to do with your technology. It's about something much deeper, something you humans would never understand." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. Samuel clenched his fists, frustrated but determined. He couldn't let this alien use their own suffering to keep him from helping. "I don't care about your politics or whatever it is you're hiding," Samuel said, his voice sharp. "I'm here to fix things. I'm here to save lives. You can stand in my way, but I won't back down." The guide's eyes flashed, and for a moment Samuel saw a flicker of something. Regret. Fear. It was gone as quickly as it appeared. The guide's posture stiffened, his shoulders tense as he finally spoke again. "Then you are truly blind," he said quietly. "What you are about to do, it will change everything. The tools you're so desperate to use aren't just for fixing your problems. They're linked to something older, something dangerous. You think you're repairing a colony? You're opening the door to something you can't control." Samuel's mind reeled. What was he talking about? He had come here with a simple mission, to help these people, to get things running again. But now, standing face to face with the alien guide, he was realizing just how little he truly knew about what was happening on this planet. "You're telling me these tools are dangerous?" Samuel asked, his voice steady despite the confusion swirling inside him. "That they could make things worse?" The guide didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his own pack and pulled out a small glowing crystal, a shard of the alien technology that had powered their entire colony. He held it up, letting the faint blue light cast eerie shadows across his face. "These," the guide said, "are not just tools. They are conduits. And what you're trying to repair, it's far more than just malfunctioning machines. You're about to unlock a force that has been sealed away for centuries, a force that, if unleashed, could destroy everything." Samuel's heart pounded in his chest, his mind racing. "And you're keeping me from using these tools because you're afraid of what I'll unlock?" The guide nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving Samuel's. "I've seen what humans can do with power. I've seen how it corrupts. I've seen what happens when you reach for things that are too big to control. I'm not stopping you because I want to control you. I'm stopping you because I'm trying to protect you from what you don't understand." Samuel stood there, frozen, the weight of the alien's words settling over him like a cold blanket. He had come here to help, to fix things. But now the very tools he needed to make things right might be the very thing that could destroy everything. The room seemed to close in on him as he realized that the battle for the tools was no longer just about fixing a broken colony. It was about choosing whether or not to risk unleashing something far more dangerous. The air was thick with tension as Samuel stood facing the alien guide, the tools still within reach, but the weight of their significance now impossible to ignore. The words the guide had spoken echoed in his mind, stirring up doubt and fear. The idea that these tools, these objects of progress, could hold the key to something dangerous made his stomach churn. He had come here to help, to fix things, not to unleash something he couldn't control. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The hum of energy from the chamber pulsed in the background, a constant reminder of the power at play. Samuel's hand hovered over the tools, but he didn't reach for them immediately. The guide's warning rang in his ears. You are about to unlock a force that has been sealed away for centuries. Was it worth the risk? Finally, Samuel broke the silence. What is this force? What is it that you're so afraid of? The guide's eyes darkened, his posture shifting, and he took a step closer, as though the weight of the truth was too heavy to share from a distance. It is not just a power, Samuel. It is a choice. A choice to wield something that could reshape everything. The tools you're so eager to use. They aren't just for fixing a broken colony. They were designed for something far more profound. Samuel swallowed hard, his mind racing to understand. You're telling me that these tools, these things I've been using, are some kind of weapon? The guide shook his head slowly, his voice filled with sadness. Not a weapon in the traditional sense, but yes, they are part of something far larger, a machine that was meant to harness a force that could change the fabric of reality itself. And the moment you use them, the moment you fix this colony, you are activating something that cannot be stopped. We've kept it hidden for a reason. The words hit Samuel like a punch to the gut. He had come here with only one goal in mind, to help these people, to fix what was broken. Now he found himself standing at the edge of a precipice, with a choice that could either save or doom them all. I've been trying to fix everything, Samuel said, his voice trembling slightly. To help, to make things right. But now you're telling me I'm about to open a door that shouldn't be opened. The guide's expression softened for a moment. You have no idea how much I wanted to believe you could fix it. But you must understand, Samuel. There are things in this universe that cannot be fixed. There are powers that must be left untouched. We, the people of this colony, have learned that the hard way. Samuel's heart pounded as the weight of the situation pressed down on him. Zara was counting on him. The colony was counting on him. Could he walk away from the tools? Could he turn his back on the chance to repair everything they had lost? Or did he risk everything, knowing the consequences could be catastrophic? Then what am I supposed to do? Samuel asked, his voice sharp now. If I leave this place without fixing anything, how many more people will suffer? How many more lives will be lost? The guide sighed, his face etched with the burden of knowledge. I'm not asking you to walk away. I'm asking you to see the bigger picture. You think your tools will fix things, but they're only a part of the equation. The truth is, the colony is beyond repair, and opening the doors to this force will only make it worse. Samuel's breath caught in his throat. You're telling me it's already too late? Not too late, but close enough, the guide replied. We need to find another way. A way that doesn't involve opening the door to the very thing we've been running from. Samuel clenched his fists. He had never been one to give up, never been one to accept defeat, but the guide's words lingered in his mind, sowing seeds of doubt. For a long moment they stood in silence, the weight of their conversation hanging heavy between them. Samuel could feel his frustration building again, but he also felt the pull of the guide's words, the truth he had been reluctant to face. I don't know what to do, Samuel said finally, his voice quieter now. I came here to help, to fix things. And now, I'm not sure what's right anymore. The guide placed a hand on Samuel's shoulder, a gesture that held both reassurance and sorrow. You've done more than you know. But now the real work begins. You have to decide, Samuel. You have to decide if you're willing to listen or if you're going to force the answer you want. Samuel closed his eyes, the weight of the decision crushing him. He had never felt so uncertain. The tools, the colony, the people, they all depended on him. But could he really risk opening the door to something he didn't understand? The silence between them stretched on, and Samuel knew that whatever decision he made next would change everything. Samuel stood in the silence, the weight of the guide's words pressing down on him like 1,000 tons. He had spent so much time focused on the tools, on fixing the broken systems, on doing what he thought was right. But now, standing at the crossroads of his choices, he couldn't help but wonder if his actions would lead to something far darker than he could imagine. The room was still, the only sound the steady hum of the alien machinery surrounding them. The tools were right in front of him, tools that had the potential to repair the colony, save lives and restore order. But if what the guide said was true, those same tools could be the catalyst for destruction. "You're asking me to turn my back on everything I came here for," Samuel finally spoke, his voice quieter than before. "I'm supposed to leave all of this behind and trust that there's a better way?" The guide's expression softened, but there was no joy in his eyes. "I'm not asking you to abandon hope. I'm asking you to see the truth. The tools you hold in your hands were never meant for this. They were part of a machine that could destabilize everything we've worked to protect. We've kept it hidden for a reason." Samuel clenched his fists at his sides, struggling to keep his emotions in check. He had come to this planet with one purpose, to help, but now he was faced with the unimaginable, the possibility that everything he had done, everything he had worked for, could be for nothing. "I don't want to be the one who causes a catastrophe," Samuel said, his voice filled with conflict. "I don't want to be the one who makes it worse. But how do I just walk away from something that could save them? Save your people?" The guide's eyes were steady, his gaze unwavering. "It's not about saving them. It's about making the right choice. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is walk away when you think you have the answer. But you don't have all the pieces yet, Samuel. You don't know what will happen if you use those tools." The uncertainty in the guide's voice only deepened Samuel's internal struggle. He had always believed that fixing things, that using his skills, was the solution to every problem. But now his conviction was starting to crack. Was he just being stubborn, or was he truly standing at the brink of a decision that could change everything? The silence between them stretched on, as if time itself had come to a standstill. Samuel's mind raced through every possible scenario. On one hand, he could take the tools, repair the colony, and bring the relief everyone had been waiting for. On the other hand, the risks were too great, and the guide's warning seemed too dire to ignore. "What if you're wrong?" Samuel asked, his voice tight with emotion. "What if these tools really can fix everything? What if we're all just too afraid of the unknown to see the possibility?" The guide hesitated, and for the first time doubt flickered in his eyes. "What if I'm not wrong?" he responded softly. "I've seen what happens when things like this are unleashed. I've seen civilizations crumble under the weight of their own ambitions. You are not the first to come to this crossroads. You may not be the last. But the cost of being wrong is greater than you can imagine." Samuel's breath hitched, the gravity of the decision sinking in. His heart pounded in his chest, each beat echoing in the quiet room. He had always believed in doing what was right, but now what was right didn't seem so clear. The uncertainty, the fear of making the wrong choice, it all threatened to overwhelm him. Finally, Samuel's gaze shifted to the tools once again. He could feel the weight of their significance pressing down on him, their potential both a blessing and a curse. They were within reach. But was he truly ready to wield that kind of power? "Is this what you want from me?" Samuel asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "To walk away from everything I've worked for, from everything I believe in?" The guide didn't answer immediately, but his eyes softened as he stepped closer to Samuel. "No," he said quietly. "I want you to see that sometimes the hardest thing to do is nothing at all. I want you to choose wisely, because once the door is opened, you cannot close it again." Samuel looked at the tools one last time, then turned his gaze to the guide. He had always believed in his ability to fix things, to make things right. But now, he knew that the cost of fixing one thing could be the destruction of another. With a deep breath, Samuel made his choice. He stepped away from the tools, his hand falling to his side. "I won't open that door," he said, his voice steady but filled with conviction. "I can't risk it, not when I don't know what's on the other side." The guide nodded slowly, his expression unreadable but filled with something like relief. "You've made the right choice, Samuel. Now we must find another way. A way that doesn't come with such terrible consequences." Samuel felt the weight of the decision lift slightly, but the road ahead was still unclear. He had made his choice, but the consequences would unfold in time, and he could only hope that, in the end, it was the right one. Samuel exhaled sharply as he stepped back from the tools. The weight of the decision still hung in the air, thick with consequence. He had made his choice, but it didn't feel like relief. It felt like the beginning of something much harder. The tension in the room seemed to fade, but the doubt remained, gnawing at him. Had he made the right choice? Was walking away truly the right answer? The guide stood silently, his eyes never leaving Samuel. There was no smile, no sign of victory or relief, just an intense, unreadable expression, as if he were watching Samuel grapple with the truth, understanding the burden of what had been decided. "You've chosen wisely," the guide said finally, his voice quiet but firm. Samuel didn't answer immediately. He stood there staring at the tools, his fingers twitching slightly as if he were still reaching for them, but his mind was no longer consumed with what could be fixed, only with the path ahead. The world around him felt both familiar and foreign. He had come here to help, to fix. But now it was about more than just technology. It was about understanding the deeper consequences of his actions, about realizing that sometimes doing nothing was the hardest and most responsible thing to do. "How do we move forward?" Samuel asked, his voice steady but filled with uncertainty. "What now? If the colony is beyond repair, if these tools can't help, then what?" The guide took a long, deep breath, his eyes flickering briefly with a mixture of sadness and resolve. "There are always other ways. You've learned that much already. The tools aren't the answer to everything. It's not just about fixing the physical, it's about rebuilding trust, relationships. It's about finding hope where there seems to be none." Samuel felt a pang of frustration. "Hope? I've seen hope in the faces of the people here. They want to believe that something can be fixed, that they're not just waiting for the inevitable collapse." The guide's expression softened slightly. "I understand. But sometimes the hardest thing to do is to admit that things can't be fixed in the way we want them to be. You've seen that too. The tools can't undo what's already been done. But you have something else, something more important. You have the will to rebuild, not with technology, but with understanding, patience, and unity." Zara, who had been silently standing behind them, spoke up, her voice surprisingly calm. "What he's saying is true, Samuel. The people here need more than just machines fixed. They need their spirits repaired. They need to believe that they can survive, that they can create something new, even if it's not what they envisioned." Samuel turned to look at her, his brow furrowed. "But how do we do that? How do we give them hope when everything seems broken beyond repair?" Zara's eyes met his, full of quiet determination. "We start small, one step at a time. We teach them to rebuild the relationships, to come together as a community. We give them the tools of collaboration, not just metal and wires. We help them find their strength in one another." Samuel absorbed her words, the weight of their meaning sinking in. For the first time he understood that fixing a broken colony wasn't just about technology. It was about healing the people who lived there. It was about rebuilding the trust that had been shattered by years of failure, fear, and isolation. He nodded slowly, the decision finally settling in his chest. "You're right," he said quietly. "I've been so focused on fixing the machines, I forgot about what really matters. The people, the community." The guide stepped closer to Samuel, his gaze steady but filled with something akin to respect. "It's never too late to begin again, but it will take more than tools. It will take hearts willing to work together. You can't fix the world alone, Samuel, but with others, you can make a difference." Samuel glanced at Zara, her face glowing with quiet strength, and then back at the guide. The way forward wasn't clear-cut, But at least now he had a sense of purpose beyond the tools and the technology. He had something to fight for: the people of this planet, their future, and the possibility of rebuilding what had been lost. "What's the first step?" Samuel asked, his voice firm now, filled with resolve. The guide smiled, a hint of warmth finally breaking through his stoic demeanor. "The first step is believing that you can still change the course. After that, you will know what to do. The path will open up to you." With a deep breath, Samuel stepped forward, knowing that the journey ahead would be long and filled with challenges. But now, he wasn't facing it alone. Zara stood beside him, and so did the people of the colony. Together, they would rebuild, one step at a time. The days that followed were a blur of activity, but not in the way Samuel had expected. Gone were the long hours spent struggling with broken equipment and alien technology. Instead, his focus shifted entirely to the people around him. The broken structures of the colony became secondary to the relationships being rebuilt, slowly but surely, one conversation at a time. Samuel worked alongside Zara, the two of them walking through the colony, talking to the alien inhabitants, helping them re-establish the trust that had been eroded over the years. It wasn't easy. There were moments of silence, moments when the weight of their past failures hung heavy in the air. But with each shared story, each small act of kindness, the walls between them began to crumble. Zara's leadership blossomed in a way Samuel hadn't anticipated. She wasn't just the girl who had built a crutch for her father. She became a symbol of resilience, of hope. The people of the colony looked to her not just for guidance, but for strength. They saw in her the future they wanted, a future where they worked together not just as individuals, but as a united community. "We've been living in the past for too long," Zara said one evening as they sat together on the edge of the colony's central square. The fading light cast a warm glow over her face, but her expression was serious, thoughtful. "It's time to move forward. It's time to stop looking for quick fixes and start building something lasting." Samuel looked over at her, sensing the weight of her words. He had seen it too. The way the colony had slowly begun to change, not through technology or tools, but through the simple act of coming together. They didn't need machines to fix their world. They needed each other. "I didn't get it at first," Samuel said, his voice quiet. "I thought it was about the tools, the tech, that fixing the machines would fix everything, but you were right." "It's not just about that," Zara smiled, a hint of warmth in her eyes. "I knew you'd figure it out eventually." Samuel chuckled softly, shaking his head. "I guess I was a little too focused on what I could fix with my hands." "It's okay," Zara said. "We all make mistakes. The important part is that we learn from them." The sun dipped lower, and for the first time Samuel truly felt a sense of peace settle over him. The conflict, the uncertainty, the pressure, it was all fading. In its place was a quiet hope. The colony wasn't just being repaired, it was being reborn, and in a way so was he. But their work was far from over. Rebuilding trust and relationships took time, and while the colony had made great strides, there were still many who were uncertain, still afraid of what lay ahead. There would be setbacks, moments of doubt, but Samuel no longer felt the weight of being the sole savior. The people of the colony had become part of the solution, and that made all the difference. As they continued to walk through the square, talking with people, exchanging ideas, Samuel couldn't help but notice the subtle changes around him. The buildings were still in disrepair, but there was a lightness in the air now, a feeling of potential. The tools that had once seemed like the key to everything now seemed almost irrelevant. The real power lay in the people, their will to rebuild, to trust, and to work together. Zara stopped at the center of the square, looking around at the people who had gathered. There were children laughing, adults talking, and for the first time in a long time, there was a sense of unity. "This is just the beginning," she said, her voice filled with quiet determination. "We've got a long way to go, but we've got something we didn't have before. We've got each other." Samuel nodded, his chest swelling with pride. The journey they had started together, however uncertain and painful, had led them here, to this moment of possibility. And for the first time in a long while, he felt like the future wasn't just a distant dream. It was within reach. As the last of the sun's rays disappeared behind the horizon, Samuel felt the weight of the past finally lift from his shoulders. They weren't out of danger yet, but they had made it through the hardest part. The tools had been abandoned, but in their place they had built something stronger, something far more lasting. And as he looked at Zara, he knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter, one that neither he nor the colony could have imagined before. Together, they would face whatever came next. The days blended together as Samuel and Zara continued their work with the colony, moving through the process of rebuilding with a sense of quiet determination. The colony, once fractured and weary, began to show signs of life. The community was stronger than it had been in years, not because of the tools Samuel had initially thought he needed, but because of the foundation they had built together: trust, unity, and resilience. It wasn't perfect. There were still challenges, still moments when the weight of the past seemed too heavy to overcome. But every small victory, every moment of collaboration, every shared laugh, every step forward, felt like a piece of the puzzle falling into place. Zara had grown in ways Samuel hadn't anticipated. The young girl who had once been consumed with fixing a crutch for her father was now a symbol of leadership. People listened to her, respected her, and followed her example. She had become the heart of this community, not because of her ability to build or fix, but because of her unshakable belief in the power of people working together. One evening, as the sun began to set over the distant horizon, Zara and Samuel stood on a small rise just outside the colony, looking out over the land they had worked so hard to restore. The air was cooler now, the day's heat giving way to a pleasant chill. The land, though still scarred from the instability of the past, now seemed full of potential. "We've come a long way," Zara said, her voice steady, but filled with the weight of everything they had achieved. "I never thought it would be like this." Samuel nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Neither did I. At first I thought all it would take was fixing machines, but I was wrong. It's more than that, it always was." Zara glanced at him, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "You figured it out. I always knew you would." Samuel chuckled softly, shaking his head. "I think I've learned more from you than you realize about people, about how to really fix things." Zara tilted her head, a curious look in her eyes. "What do you mean?" "You taught me that it's not about doing things alone," Samuel said, his voice low but filled with meaning. "It's about sharing the load, about bringing people together, not just for survival but for something greater." For a long moment they stood in silence, watching as the colony below them continued to buzz with life. The hum of energy, the laughter of children, the conversations of adults. It was all a reminder of how far they had come. "I couldn't have done it without you," Samuel said finally, turning to face Zara fully. "You gave me more than just hope. You gave me a reason to believe that we could build something from the ground up." Zara smiled, her eyes softening as she met his gaze. "And you gave me the tools to see that I wasn't alone. I always thought I had to do everything myself, but now I see that's not true. We did this together." Samuel nodded, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. There were still so many challenges ahead. They hadn't solved everything, and there would be more obstacles, more setbacks, more moments of doubt. But for the first time, Samuel felt like he wasn't carrying the weight of the world alone. They were in this together, and that made all the difference. "I think we've built something that can last," Zara said quietly, her voice filled with a quiet pride. "We've shown them that it's possible, that they don't have to give up." Samuel looked at her, his heart swelling with pride. She had become more than just a leader. She was a symbol of everything the colony had overcome and everything it could still become. "We have a long way to go," Samuel said, his voice steady. "But this is just the beginning." Zara nodded, her eyes fixed on the horizon as the last rays of the sun dipped below the skyline. "Yeah," she said softly. "This is just the beginning." And as the two of them stood there side by side, Samuel knew that the legacy of what they had built together, what they had learned, would last long after they were gone. The people of the colony had found something far more powerful than the tools he had brought with him. They had found each other.